Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Carpenter. I'm the Associate Curator of Birds and Mammals at the Seattle Aquarium. And I'm here today in front of our Northern Fur Seal exhibit where we have two males, Lou and Flaherty. Lou is a rescued animal from California, and Flaherty was born at the New England Aquarium. And with me today is Dr. Jeremy Sterling. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
Great. And Jeremy works with NOAA. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, your title, and what you work with?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about northern fur seals during this period of where we're working from home quite a bit. I work for the Alaska Fisheries Science Center, which is a federal research center that's tasked with collecting all the data that goes into managing federal fisheries in the state of Alaska. And the group that I work with is at the Marine Mammal Laboratory. And within the Marine Mammal Laboratory, there are subgroups that study different species of marine mammals in Alaska. And the reason we study them is because they are predators and they're eating a lot of a variety of fish and squid species, and some of which are commercially fished. So we monitor their populations in order to inform the fishery manager so they can make good decisions about extracting resources in Alaska. So I am a fisheries biologist with the Marine Mammal Laboratory, and I study two species of seals. One of them is swimming around right behind you, a northern fur seal, and the other species is a stellar sea lion.
Great. So what is it that you do specifically with northern fur seals? I know you have many different projects, but what are some of those things that you work on?
Yeah, our program, I work with this group, it's the Alaska Ecosystems Group, and we collect information to understand how many animals are there. We need to know what the population is doing from year to year. So whether its population is going up or it's going down, or if in case with the northern fur seal, different populations are going up and going down. So the only reason we know that is because we go out and we have different ways of counting them. We also need to know what they eat. We need to know where they go to feed. And so those are some of the basic things that we do to collect information on them. Within those, there's a lot of kind of high-tech modeling, isotope analysis of blood to understand diets, and really sophisticated satellite tracking and sail drone research to follow animals and whatnot. So within those broad categories, we collect really important information just in general, how many animals, what they eat, and where do they go. But some of the methods that are involved in that can be fairly sophisticated.
Great. You mentioned looking at different populations. How is their population doing maybe overall, or are you noticing some trends in certain areas?
Yeah, so the Alaska Fisheries Science Center is tasked with monitoring the Eastern Pacific stock of northern fur seals, and that consists of essentially 3 summer breeding sites. Two of the sites are located in the Pribilof Islands, and the other site is Bogoslav Island. At the 3 different sites, we see 3 different trends. At the largest colony, the St. Paul Island colony, we see a continued decline, which really initiated in the late 90s and has continued until now. St. George Island, which is just another island to the south, about 40 miles to the south of St. Paul, there's a smaller population of about 27,000 pups born there compared to the 80,000 or so that are born on St. Paul. That population essentially began to stabilize. It was declining as well, but it stabilized around 2004, 2006, and is actually in the last few years has started to increase. And the other population that our program is tasked monitoring is Bogoslav Island, and that island is a volcanic island that's actually active. It recently blew up.
Yeah.
But while the fur seals were there, but it didn't seem to have an effect on the population. That population has been increasing on average of about, I think it's about 10% per year since the late 90s as well. The first pups that were born there were in the early 80s. So this makes doing research on fur seals really interesting, because we have the ability to compare what might be driving these different population trajectories to get a better idea of why the largest population that we're monitoring is continuing to decline. Now, fur seals aren't just in the eastern stock. The US also manages what's called the California stock. And those populations are on San Miguel Island and the Channel Islands in California. And there's a growing population off of the Farallon Islands. And then there are other populations over in Russia and in Japan. But basically, we think most of those populations have stabilized. They're either stable or increasing a little bit. It's the largest population, the St. Paul Island population, is the one that continues to decline and is receiving a considerable amount of, there's a lot of research going on in that area.
Yeah, sounds very, very interesting, and a lot of pieces to sort of think about and manage, for sure. So the Seattle Aquarium has been working with you and collaborating with you in as much as we can, since we have a unique opportunity to work with our seals here in a more controlled environment like this. We have the luxury of being able to weigh them regularly, monitor exactly how much food they need, and things of that nature. And I know we love working with you whenever possible. What is some of the information that you've been able to, of some of the information that we've given to you, what are some of the things that you've been able to do with that information?
Yeah, that's been, the Seattle Aquarium has been extremely helpful in filling some of the gaps we have in a variety of projects. And one of the bigger projects we have going right now is simply estimating how much food the population in the eastern stock is consuming each year. And we have a lot of information on adult breeding females and juveniles and pups, but our biggest gap is information on adult males or larger juvenile males. And the main reason for that is the logistics of working with adult male fur seals, which can be fairly dangerous. They can be aggressive animals, and it's just a lot easier to work with the other sex and age categories than the adults. So the result of that is we don't have a lot of information on exactly where they go. We have done some tracking, a much smaller amount compared to all the other age and sex categories. And we don't have a lot of information on what they eat and how they kind of grow throughout the season. So when you try to estimate or make a bioenergetic model of the population of fur seals in Alaska, not having that information is a big gap, because males are about 5 times as big as females and they consume a lot more food. And that's what we're after in just kind of addressing the question of how much they eat. So you have a significant part of the population that you have limited amount of information, and that's where the zoo and aquaria groups have stepped up and provided all their growth rate information. So we see strong seasonal patterns in how they grow and they put on weight and how they lose weight. And also just the caloric intake of what they eat during that seasonality, which matches up well with what we see how these animals behave and grow and change in the wild populations. So in essence, you're providing information that's filling a gap, but also validating some of the assumptions that we put into the bioenergetic model and allowed us to kind of fine tune those assumptions with that information. It's been very important to us.
That is awesome. And we love sharing that information whenever possible and working with you all as well. what you mentioned a little bit about what they're like to work with, especially the males. When you're out doing the research, what are some of the things that you enjoy the most, or what is something about this species that you find is very interesting, or something you think the public would love to learn about?
Well, I love going to Alaska. It's an amazing place, and the wildlife in Alaska is incredible. And lucky for me, I get to study one of the species that occupies that area. I also get to go to the islands, the Pribilof Islands and Bogoslav. Those islands are really unique. They have lots of seabird species, different marine mammal species, different seals up there that are really interesting to see and work around. There's also the community, the Pribilof communities of St. Paul and St. George. They're wonderful communities to work with and partner with. What I love about working with fur seals is, one, they are a beautiful animal, and they are very interesting in terms of their ecological place in the environment. And in many ways, we're using these, we're trying to do our best to conserve them, but they're also ecological indicators to the health of the ecosystem. So to have a little place in that process is, I enjoy that very much. Working with them, it depends on how big the fur seal is. The bigger they are, the harder it is to work with them. And when you get to the size of the animals that are behind you, you have to start using darting techniques and knocking them out in order to work with them. But the younger and smaller animals are fairly easy. It's physically demanding in terms of you're actually just physically restraining the animal and collecting the information you need. They are very tenacious, and we call them pups, little chainsaws. You went up and worked with them, so you know what it's like to work with them. But one of the nice characteristics of this species is that we can collect a lot of information about where they go, what they eat, and also how their population is doing. They're accessible, I guess. You know, some other species, seal species, are much more difficult to work with in the wild, and fur seals are easier, I'll say. They can be pretty aggressive, but they're easier to work with.
Yeah, and just to give everyone at home an idea, it's hard because they're not hauled out or up on the dry resting area or the exhibit behind them, but both of them are around 220 pounds right now, and they're at 7 and 8 years old. They still have a lot of growing to do, where we expect them to double, if not triple, that size during for the breeding season or leading up to the breeding season. So we're excited for their growth in the next few years as they learn how to be adult males. So,
and I'll say to you, Julie, that is the upper limit. Like to catch just we catch them with nets, and to catch one of those guys, that's the top right there. We don't want to go any higher than or any bigger than that.
Yeah. So you mentioned when you are out working with some of the larger animals and you do a brief anesthesia on them very quickly so that you can assess them, especially some of those larger males. What is it that you do with those animals? I know you mentioned satellite trackers. Is that the primary thing that you do, is the satellite tags for them when they're working with something that large?
Yeah, we do a couple more things. To get your hands on an animal like that is a rare opportunity, and so we make an effort. We have permits, so we submit permit applications to collect various sampling. And one of the things we do is we collect blood samples. That helps us assess the health and condition. But it also, we're able to collect and get isotope information. And from that isotope information, it gives us, we can look at specific isotopes that tell us where in the food web the animal is consuming its prey. It won't tell us exactly what prey it consumed. It'll tell us it's eating really big fish or squid or, you know, kind of in those categories. But that's really important because we don't have a lot of information from them in the wild in terms of exactly where they sit in the trophic food web. And that that information helps with our ongoing modeling efforts. And so in the satellite tracking is the kind of the main motivation behind most of the work, is just where do they go in particular during the winter time. What we've known from the historical record, from lots of interviews with Aleut hunters throughout the Aleutians, and also from there used to be commercial sealing, pelagic sealing historically. They've all pointed to adult males residing in the Aleutians and the Gulf of Alaska at higher latitudes than the females and the pups and the juveniles migrate to, which come down to the lower latitudes. And so the satellite tracking data that we collected essentially supported those early observations. The main difference is we actually get to watch an individual through time and how they go about their migratory patterns. So while the tracking is the main motivation, we'll make an effort to get other samples, which are hard to get otherwise, to address other questions in our research.
Yeah, very interesting. So Jeremy, I wanted to wrap up with, I know there's a lot of people at home that would love to help in any way, not just the species that we're discussing right now, the northern fur seals, but if there's anything they can do at home to help the marine environment in general, or the species that we're talking about, what are some things that can maybe help inspire some people or give them an idea how they can help in the future?
Yeah, I think that most of the public's pretty well informed on what they can do. In general, the role of reducing our plastic use is helpful because there are many studies that are looking at plastics in the ocean and finding them in just about everything and everywhere. So trying to limit that in the best ways we can, or to make sure everything ends up in the garbage or in the recycle bin, is really important. Obviously, there's ongoing changes in the climate, and one of the roles that we can do as a community is to just try to reduce our carbon output through different methods, and so people can always work to do that. And there's lots of access to resources to understand what exactly you can do within that realm. And then lastly, there are some really good apps or online resources to look at sustainable fisheries and making choices about eating and consuming a variety of fishes that are sustainably harvested is another way to go about doing things.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, well, I want to thank you, Jeremy, so much for joining me today at the Seattle Aquarium and joining our boys Lou and Flaherty, who are right behind me. I want to again, thank you, and we'd love to see you as soon as social distancing can, as soon as things calm down a little bit, we'd love to see you and everybody else come back to the aquarium and join us here. So
yeah, and I'll just say, you know, I really love working with you guys and having the opportunities to be at the aquarium and do something that we've done here online. So I missed that opportunity, and I look forward to being able to come to the Seattle Aquarium again. It's really sad we don't have that outreach opportunity right now, so thank you for giving me this opportunity here online.
Thank you for joining us, and if anyone would like additional information, you can go to seattleaquarium.org, and we'll have a lot of other things featuring lots of different species here, but including the northern fur seals this week and many weeks to come. So thanks, Jeremy. And
you're welcome.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right, sounds great.
Have a great day.
Bye.